Welcome to Dr. Oman Show, and today we're going to discuss about the recent happenings when the president went to Gusii. And there were many discussions which came up, but I thought we had a very interesting conversation about what the former vice president talked about. I thought that was something very important that we need as a community to look at. He clearly lamented about the state of Gusii right now. In Gusii land, you could still see it clearly that it's different from other regions, other counties which are bordering with. The population density is very high, and actually now if something is not done, it's going to turn into be a big rural slum in Kenya. Actually the population, if we look at the population, because he clearly stated that we need to apply international best practices, and he talked about how Europe did it during the Industrial Revolution. They forced people to consolidate the land. And then he also gave an example of South Korea, where they used the philosophy of Saemaul Undong approach, which I thought was the best. And this is something I've seen people go for benchmarking, and my God, I wonder, I've seen ministers from Gusii Nyamira County go to South Korea. I don't know why somebody has never brought it until the Prime Minister brought it. Just to give a recap, the population of South Korea right now is 51 million, equally like the one in Kenya according to World Bank latest for 2019. South Korea has a population of 51 million, and Kenya has also a population of 51 million. Gusii has a population of 2.2 million. Gusii is a part of Kenya. And actually, by 1960, the population of South Korea was 25 million, while the population of Kenya was only 8 million. See how the short time from 1960 that we have the country of Kenya has caught up with South Korea, which means it's going up. And in 1960, the population of Gusii was actually estimated to be around 79,000. You can imagine that. In 1960, we were about 79,000. And now we are 2.2 million. So you can see the disparity is that if we were 8 million in 1960 and South Korea, you can see that. Total land area in South Korea is 97,000 square kilometers. 97,000. And here we are 56,000 square kilometers in Kenya. And Gusii is 2,231 square kilometers. Population density in South Korea is 528 kilometers per square mile, while the averaging in Kenya is 92 square kilometers. But when it comes to Gusii, the population density is 932 kilometers square. You can see how the population density is far much than other places. So that is the state of Gusii, and I thought that was the best thing that Raila tried to address. And that is something very, very important. That's why it took his speech to be very common. And I want to talk about this Saemaul Undong approach. First of all, I want to give a brief history of South Korea. South Korea for many years was colonized by Japan. And at that time, during colonization, most of the land belonged to landlords who were mostly of Japanese origin. And Koreans were just renters. They were renting their own land. So they were paying rent as much as 60%. And they were so poor. So after they gained independence in 1945, after the fall of Japan during the Second World War, and they were under the custody of caretaker of the U.S. government. And in 1948, they passed what they called the Land to the Tiller Agrarian Reform, which transferred most of the land from landlords to owners, which they were buying it at a very subsidized rate, and then they became owners. But they were only restricted to get like 1 acre to 2 acres, so it wasn't a lot of much. So in the 1960s, as Korea embarked on industrialization, they utilized the cheap labor. Actually, in 1960s, South Korea, after the Civil War, which separated North Korea, which became communist, and then South Korea remained, they continued to emphasize in industrialization. That's when they had all these industries like Samsung and the others. You can see many products from South Korea. So many people were living in rural areas because the rural was not actually beneficial to farm on 1 acre land, and most of the people went to the town to get jobs in the many industries was coming there. So after they had succeeded in industrialization, in 1970, President Park realized he had abandoned the rural area, and therefore he wanted to do something, and that's where he introduced what we call Saemaul Undong approach. And that's how he brought in this approach in 1970, which was a new community movement. And it aimed to rearrange plots to construct large-scale plot for farming, for labor efficiency, and to identify and support those who are authorized farmers to work on the farm. So with all this, because of all these, after industrialization, they had to make these radical land to tiller reforms, and because they thought they had neglected agriculture. So they started modernizing the rural village. Actually, the villages were provided with agricultural materials, even building materials. So they were having these grass-thatched houses. They were given iron sheets to use for building. And then they trained and indoctrinated them in this philosophy. They were trained, and then they were forced to consolidate the land, so that few farmers who remain, they can have they can do large scale farming, which will be much more profitable. So that is what they really emphasize, and they use even village clans to do that, and it really succeeded to modernize. The government also controlled the prices of rice, so they will buy rice from farmers at a standard rate, which made them actually profitable, which I think was something good. They created a green revolution. So the people were living together in villages. They were moved and they were living together to leave space for land, and they will get all the infrastructure and everything to them. So that is how productivity increased, and the government also with the training, and it also provided fertilizer and good extension services. And they also encouraged rural cooperatives to do this, which actually brought mechanization. Also, they were able to use tractors now for cheap labor, because many people were working in industries. And they changed rural South Korea to be a very nice place to live. So it was no difference living in an urban area and a rural area. Now, what can we borrow for Gusii, which actually you can see that the population density is much far higher than the one in South Korea right now? And that, I thought that is what Raila was addressing, and I thought that was a good point. I have not seen any leader in Gusii address that. But this is something we really need to discuss. What are some of the best practices we can learn from here? If we have to take people for benchmarking, I've seen MCA go to South Korea. What did they come? We have never seen any this land policy. I would think we will need to look at this. We will need to do land consolidation. We need to create sustainable communities by rearranging the land to be productive. Let us have people in groups move like people of the same lineage. We designate a place for building settlement houses to live, so that we can provide the sewage system instead of creating all these pit latrines which end up to drain to our rivers and pollute the rivers. Plant trees in mountains and hills so that we can change the climate, we can save the climate and have enough trees. Right now they plant trees on rivers and they have drained all the rivers. If we can create these neighborhoods where we are able to live in a specific area, where we are provided even with optic fiber, I think if the government can do this so that people can be consolidated, and then on top of that, if we can, they can be able to provide all this infrastructure like the water system, electricity and roads, it will be easier. Then let us create cottage industry to add value to farm products before going to the market, such as we can process milk and make milk products, or even in fruits. Instead of selling fruits, we will process them, and that one we will add value to them. Then the government will also try to increase agricultural research for best practices, get varieties of grains or of crops which can grow there, so that Gusii can change. Otherwise, this is awakening that Gusii really needs to wake up with this what our Prime Minister said. If you really look at the picture of Gusii now and how the population is so close, and we have almost 40% of the land in Gusii is settlement, where we are building houses. If we can put these houses in the same place, have where we bury our dead people, where we have our public schools, I think this will transform Gusii into a better place, and then be much more productive. You know, we can imagine where we live together, and then the land is left where we will have forests, and the other places are there for us to farm. Will be really beneficial, and we will be victorious. So I really say that this is a topic I will want everybody to chip in, and let us talk clearly how we can transform Gusii into a sustainable community which we will be proud to go, instead of developing a slum, which will not actually be helping us in any near future. Because if we leave Gusii, degrade and become a forest, it will be very absurd. So I would want to hear your comments about this.